Daily Tech News Show is made possible by you listening right now. Thank you. That includes Pat, Mike Cortez, Erwin Sturr, and Jim Noft. On this episode of DTNS, has AI hit a wall? We ask Andrew Mayne. Plus, Big Jim the Trade Nerd helps us understand how tech products get priced and why the rumored iPhone 17 Air might be too thin. This is the Daily Tech News for Monday, November 25th, 2024. In Los Angeles, I'm Tom Merritt.
From the Atlanta area, I'm Nica Montford.
I'm the show's producer, Roger Chang.
And we are kicking off the week with a jam-packed show. It's going to be fun. You're going to learn something. You're going to have a good time. And we're going to start with the quick hits. Raspberry Pi announced an updated version of the Pico 2, the Pico 2W. The W stands for Wi-Fi because it's got an onboard Wi-Fi chip. It just costs a couple dollars more than the Pico 2, so $7 instead of $5. Includes the RP2350 microcontroller that includes 802.11n, which is also known as Wi-Fi 4 these days. And you get Bluetooth upgraded to 5.2 along with that. Also has a single USB 1.1 port. Those are all important things to know if you're someone who plays around with these Raspberry Pis. The new RP2350 microcontroller is the one they announced in August. And interestingly, it combines architectures. It uses both ARM and RISC-V architecture.
Bloomberg sources say Sony is in the, quote, very early stages of working on a portable console. Microsoft also has said it is working on a portable, but both of these projects are years away.
Yeah, I wrote this up in my Substack newsletter of why I don't know if this is ever going to pan up into anything, but we'll see.
Just keep saying it'll eventually happen.
Yeah. Like Fetch. The Roku channel is already available on Android TV and therefore on Google TV. You don't need a Roku device or TV to watch it, but Roku just announced some integration into Google TV. So if you're using a device that uses Google TV, you can search through the Google TV app and Roku channel shows can show up. So you don't have to jump into the Roku channel app to find them. New tabs are coming to the Google TV home screen that will recommend Roku channel content and show you episodes you're in the middle of, so you can jump right back in and finish them. Finally, around 500 of Roku's FAST channels, the free ad-supported channels, are coming to Google TV's Live tab.
Mac Rumors spotted a memo that indicates that MacBook Pro speakers will be available this week as a standalone component, making them cheaper to repair. Right now, you have to replace the entire top case to replace the speakers. The top case includes things like the battery and other parts that make it expensive, especially if you only need to replace the speaker. Right now, you have to available now is a repair manual that has the steps for replacing just the speaker modules. And then guess what? It's already available online.
NVIDIA debuted a new generative model called Foundational Generative Audio Transformer Opus 1, or Fugato. Forgot about it. It can create or modify audio from a text prompt, works with multiple kinds of sounds, including music, and NVIDIA says it has strong multi-accent and multilingual capabilities. They did a lot of work to bring in people from around the world for that. NVIDIA said it could be used by music producers, for example, to prototype a song and even edit it. Video game producers could use it to modify pre-recorded assets so that they change dynamically with player actions. And they also suggested it would be great for building your own language learning tools. NVIDIA did not announce when or who will get access to it.
It's holiday season, which probably means you are looking for deals on the tech you want. I know I am. But it also got us thinking, how do these prices really get set? Why can't the sale price just be the price all the time? Do companies lose money during sales? So Tom found someone who could answer that question for us.
James Thatcher is a trade consultant, host of thetradenerd.com. He sometimes goes by the name Big Jim, if you've seen him in our chat rooms or Discord. Thanks for talking to me, man. Good to have you joining us.
Oh, it's wonderful to be with you, Tom. Always great time to be on DTNS.
Now, I've talked to you before about logistics, and there's a lot we could talk about that still, I'm sure. But with sales coming up, with the holiday season coming up, I wanted to talk about prices, because I see people talking about prices, and I see discounts where it's like the manufacturer discount or the retailer discount. So I figured this would be helpful in understanding when you're shopping for consumer electronics, like what goes into this pricing. So let's start real basic. Like, how does a company determine the price of something it's selling?
Well, the first thing they do is they take a Ouija board out. No, I'm kidding.
Or are you?
Well, some companies actually do that. Typically what you do is you look at what is the manufactured cost of a good. So you have to, find all your components, bill of material, labor cost, overhead, those types of things. And you come up with that information. Then based on that, you look at what else is competitive in the market to figure out what kind of profit percentage you can incur with that. Now, that's the manufacturer. So if you're buying direct from a manufacturer, that's usually how they're kind of pricing things out. They're looking to try and make a certain spread. Now, the percentage of markup is typically called, from what your purchase price is to what your sale price is typically rated in a percentage, and we call those points in the industry. Retailers call those points. So some companies look for a low point with massive volume. Some companies look for high points with small volume. Most are somewhere in between. Most are trying to get on typical 30 to, anywhere between 30 to 40% is pretty good as far as middleman. Retailers like to go a little higher because they have added cost with expenses such as marketing, the operations of any retail space that they have, and a lot more overhead.
So essentially, I think a lot of people think, well, the cost is how much it costs you to make it, and maybe a tiny bit more. And what you're saying is, if I'm getting this right, both from the manufacturer and even with retail, the cost is how much does it cost us to carry this, and then how much more can we get? Because we want to make as much. It's not just big companies that do this. Garage sale people do this. How much can we get on top of that?
Well, it's not just how much more can you get. It also comes back to, the money and the profit that you make on a product helps determine R&D expenses for future generations. Mm-hmm. It also helps determine marketing, sales, mergers and acquisitions, purchases that you might be looking at doing in the future. And then you also have financial requirements, maybe through your investors. So, for example, if you are a privately held company by venture capitalists, they're looking for a certain percentage of return every single year to make their investment. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. If you're a publicly held company, you have to have an earnings per share ratio that keeps your investors happy. Otherwise, they start to dump your stock, and, well, then the value of your company goes down. Yeah. So it's dependent on a lot of different factors, such as size and industry. But for the most part, that's how price is looked at.
Yeah, the price is what people will pay, and there's a range in there that you can go and all of that, but it just has to be above what it cost, right?
Well, and then there's also things that you can go below cost. We've seen in the past certain companies, for example, Nintendo and Sony will go below cost on the hardware object just because they know they're going to make it up in the software. Those types of things are, what we used to call the old razor model of you would go and buy the razor for near to at cost, but you'd be sucked into buying all the razor blades at a specific cost that is way overly inflated, and that's where they make their money.
And I feel like that might help inform our next question, which is, okay, so how does a sale price work? If I've done all this work to determine what the price should be, why would I take 20% off on Black Friday?
Well, because you're trying to, it comes down to mix. I guess that's the cleanest way to say it. It comes down to a mix. What you're trying to do is you're trying to drive in people to come into your store. If you're doing either an online store or a physical store, it doesn't matter. You're trying to get people to spend time with you as a retailer to not only purchase the low margin items that you might be selling, but also the high margin. So if you go in and you're shopping for a computer, okay, you buy the computer, maybe they're only making 3 to 5 points on that specific computer, but then you need a bag. Then you need a additional charger. You might need additional peripherals to go with it. And those items are what they're going to then build up that profit margin with as a whole of cart, I guess is the best way to look at it.
So it's not exactly the same as the loss leader thing we were just talking about where you sell below cost, but the idea is like, okay, I may not make as much on this one, but it'll pay off.
Right. So the idea behind a lot of these doorbuster deals is they keep that low because it's a doorbuster. They want people at the door. They want people to bust in and go for those specific items. But hey, while you're here, why don't you look at something over here that we make 40 to 50 points on so that we can turn around and justify the cost overall. The other thing to look at is, competition also plays into this a lot. And we have seen companies that will go out and do loss leader products for, not only for Black Friday, but they'll push that in through TVs are a good example of this. They'll push those TV costs from Black Friday all the way through the big game day, which we of course can't say, because
it's the Super Bowl. You're allowed to say it in some context, but
I'm not having the NFL come after me, Tom. Overall, they're going to push those because again, you come in and you buy the one thing, you're going to be coming back to buy more, and that's the overall.
You're building the habit, basically. Yeah.
You're building the habit and you're building the loyalty, and that's the other thing that we're seeing lately that a lot of these retailers are pushing more and more is consumer information, consumer points, consumer spending to keep people in the door. This used to be very, very common with your warehouse and club experience groups such as Costco and BJ's and Sam's, where you would want to bring those people in, they pay a membership fee, but you can then target them and move products of mass bulk through there to keep your percentages high. But we're seeing that now with anything from going to buy bagels all the way to trying to get haircuts, where that intelligence and that information, if they can get you in with a doorbuster and they can get your information, then they can turn around and market to you better.
Fantastic information. Big Jim, thank you so much for helping me understand this, helping everybody understand this. If folks want to keep up with you, where should they go?
Oh, well, there's always thetradenerd.com, but the best place to find me is on the DTNS Discord. Why aren't you in there, people? Come on, join us. Have a fun time. Message me, and I'll be more than happy to talk more about the wonderful world of trade.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jim.
Take care.
All right, let's get into this iPhone 17 Air rumor to be coming next year. Supposedly, it'll be between 5 and 6 millimeters thick, which would make it the smallest iPhone since the iPhone 6. The iPhone 6 was 6.9 millimeters. It would be much thinner than the iPhone 16, which is 7.8 millimeters. It makes it hard to fit enough battery in, though, according to the information. It will only have a single speaker in its earpiece because there's no room for a second speaker at the bottom. It will use Apple's in-house 5G modem. Again, this is all according to the information sources, but it will not support millimeter wave 5G service, which is the fastest 5G service, although it's the one that won't go through walls. So not everybody's using it all the time, but it'll be a more limited modem. It'll have a single camera on the back housed in a large centered camera bump, and it won't have a SIM tray. It'll only rely on eSIM, which is a problem if they want to sell it in China, since the government requires you to have a physical SIM tray if you want to sell a phone in China, because they want to be able to make you show up and show your ID and associate your real name with that SIM card. So some issues with making it so thin, Nica, but it has to be thin, right? Everyone wants the thinnest phone? I don't know. It seems weird.
So you don't have to really convince me too hard to buy an Apple product. I am an Apple snob after all.
Sure.
But I don't know what the purpose of this phone particularly is. We just got the iPhone 16 and, these phones are already pretty thin. What you're sacrificing for in thinness, I don't think it quite is worth the loss for what you're going
for 2 millimeters,
right? For what the capability that's going to be reduced for. Now, the only thing that I could probably say would make it worth it for someone is if the price point is really low. You already have the iPhone SEs, which is kind of like the quote unquote discount phone for iPhone. So it would have to be less than the SE
I guess.
to me to even really make sense. But the SE is already fairly inexpensive. So I don't know what kind of legs this rumor has, because I just don't see the benefit of Apple creating this and the return that it'll get as compared to the current devices that we have out there. So I'm a little flummoxed, if you will, at the notion of an iPhone Air.
Yeah, it's a great point about the SE, because all of the sources are telling the various folks like Mark Gurman and Ming-Chi Kuo that an iPhone SE is coming in the first quarter or so next year, that it'll be updated. It'll still be in that affordable price range, that mid-range price range. So yeah, I doubt the 17 Air would be meant to supplant that. It seems like it would be something that would be introduced in the fall. And wouldn't be a bargain phone. Maybe it'd be slightly less expensive, but it seems like it's just meant to be a style that's like, oh, you want something very slim, and maybe 2 millimeters difference feels bigger in your hand, right? Sometimes that can happen, but I just don't know who is the target market of people who are like, yes, the thinnest phone possible appeals to me.
Yeah, I have to agree. I don't know who the target audience is for this purchase. So
if they weren't making these compromises, I'd be less confused. I'd be like, well, making it thin is an interesting marketing proposition. But if it's going to have, possibly smaller battery, and there's some thermal issues as well. Yeah. A reduced speaker. I don't know if they're using their own modem because that makes it thinner because they can design it, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of it. So you're compromising on millimeter wave. Again, most people are probably not using millimeter wave in their 5G phones, but it's a lot of compromises to put together. And if they can't even sell it in China, if they can't make a physical SIM tray fit in there, seems like a lot of compromises. That's all.
Seems like a lot for sure.
Well, if you know why they're going to make an iPhone 17 Slim, let us know on social networks. You can get in touch with us at DTNS Show on X, at DTNS Show at mstdn.social on Mastodon, at Daily Tech News Show on TikTok, and DTNS Pix, DTNS PIX on Instagram and on Threads. AI models took off for most people, became into your mind for most people in November 2022 when ChatGPT launched. That was on OpenAI's GPT 3.5 model. 5 months later, they had GPT-4. And they've had other models since, but not a GPT-5. Anthropic launched a 3.5 version of its Sonnet in June, 3.5 version of Haiku in November, but has been delayed on a 3.5 version of Claude Opus. There's also Gemini delays from Google. Some people have been describing this as AI hitting the wall. So we wanted to talk to Andrew Mayne, who keeps up on all of this. And I kind of take my cues, Andrew, from you on where AI is going. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, glad to be here, Tom.
Do you think that what do you think people mean when they say AI has hit a wall? And do you think it has?
I think they don't know what they're talking about. I'll be honest with you. So you did a pretty good timeline there of where AI has been. For me, it started back. It was 4 years ago when I started at OpenAI working on capabilities discovery, which was trying to find out what these models could do. And OpenAI had made a big bet that you could scale, increase the amount of compute, put data into it, and continue to get increasing returns. And that's when they went from GPT-1 to GPT-2 to 3 to GPT-4. And that's been sort of the mentality of Anthropic, and Dario left OpenAI to go to Anthropic with his team members there and other AI labs too. And the idea of the wall kind of comes into this idea that, at some point you're going to run out of it. At some point it can't work, which, certainly is true. It's certainly you reach a limit of scale of you can only make a jet engine so big or so powerful, but you can't go much faster. There's certain things that have these limitations. You can only get a solar panel that gets to 100% efficiency. You can't get to 105%. The thing that I bring up is that the people who are saying, oh, we hit the wall, one, it's, based on we hear a rumor, we heard this thing about, something there. my friends still working on this stuff. I know the research at OpenAI. Nobody there's panicking. Nobody there's acting like, hey, I think we hit a wall. And I think that there's been a lot of incredible developments that have happened along the way that we just sort of forget about. Remember, GPT-4 was last year. Last year was GPT-4, okay? And as you scale these models, you have to increase the size of the amount of compute. So if you were using, 10,000 computers, 10,000 clusters, you might go to 100,000, whatever. Or you increase the training time. If you don't have 10x the compute, if you want to 10x what you're training, you increase the training time, et cetera. With these models is one, it might take longer to train because if you want to increase the amount of compute, you also have to factor in testing, how long it takes to test. Bigger models take longer to test. There's safety training. There's all these other things that come into play. Plus, if you screw something up, let's say that you go in to go test a model and you do a big 6-month training run or something like that, and you found out that one of your evals is way off, then you got to start over. So for us to say when we hit the wall, I don't think like a year or so in is the time to say it. If we hit 2 or 3 years, I'd be okay. But also we had a big development, a really big development that just came out a couple months ago, and that was the O1 models from OpenAI, which showed that not only can you make these models smarter or better capable of generalization by increasing how much compute used in training, when you do inference time, you can actually, when you let it think about a problem longer, we found out that all of a sudden it lifted all these evals. And these are effectively models that were the same size as we had a year ago, but now you increase that. So there are all these different levers you can pull that increase the amount of capabilities.
Yeah, I get the sense when people talk about the wall that they're saying, well, we had ChatGPT come out of nowhere, and then we had ChatGPT 4, and where's 5? When what you're describing sounds like maybe the progress has slowed, but it's not stopped and it's not going down. Do you think that sounds right? Is progress slowing? Is it leveling out? Or how would you characterize it?
I don't know how. It depends how we measure what we talk about progress. So if you think about the problem we've run into right now is when you want to measure the capability of these models. Now I ran into this, so I had to handle part of the release for GPT-4. And as I'm trying to figure out how to explain to people what GPT-4 is capable of, I'm looking for really good examples to show what it can do. And GPT 3.5 kept getting better and better and better at it. And the difference between GPT 3.5 and 4 started to diminish a bit because all of a sudden, it was GPT 3.5 was doing better on evals. But even then with GPT-4, to try to show how great it was after, I run into this a lot. I know these O1 reasoning models are really good for certain tasks, but I have to think of what's a problem that average people can't get what's a good problem that average people can't get to solve with a model? And I struggle trying to think of what does it fail at? And I have to come up with more complex things. And that's the problem in trying to train these models or build better versions, is we know these models generalize. We know that they can actually, if you give them bigger, better problems to solve and you do reinforcement learning, they learn how to solve those problems. The problem is just creating evaluations. If I want a model to be able to write complex scientific proofs, I have to have a way to evaluate those scientific proofs. I have to have a way to do that. And that's one of the problems. It's a limitation right now, is really the evaluations.
And I know Altman has been very bullish about agents, as are many other people. And to me, it sounds like, it's not that progress has slowed maybe so much as we are getting different ways for models to be used, in some cases, maybe more narrow ways.
Yeah. And there's back in the olden days at GPT-3, if you wanted to train a model, you would just take a large corpus of text like Common Crawl or things like, all the freely available, publicly available text on the internet or whatever. And you just take an algorithm and you say, hey, look at this, predict what comes next, keep running through this until you're very good at predicting when you see a sequence what comes next, right? And, that gave us an amazing thing, GPT-3. But then we said, OK, that's good. But if I want to prompt it, I can't just say write a blog post because it might literally think I'm having a conversation with somebody I'm working for me and gets no, you write it. So we learned that, OK, if you give it what we call instruction training, that these models became better at it, right? Which was one of the big lists from GPT-3 to 3.5 and ChatGPT was giving it all this instruction training. So where we're at right now is that trying to figure out, we've realized that just training it on a large corpus of text is only going to get you so far. Now you need to think about synthetic data and structured data and higher quality data. That's why the labs are right now actually reaching out to PhDs, Nobel laureates, and other people to create much, much more higher quality material, because we're pretty good at answering the average question you might ask on the internet. Now we got to figure out the next level.
So it's not as much about bulk as it is about quality?
Absolutely. It's the bulk was good for learning rules of language, some general facts about the world. But if I want to have a model that is, an expert at understanding certain branches of physics or medicine, then I need much more higher quality data, maybe not a Reddit forum.
Now, there was one thing you mentioned on the last attention mechanism that I heard forgive me if I'm remembering it wrong, but it sounded like you said the pieces for an artificial generalized intelligence are all there. Am I remembering that right?
So the challenge is, what's our definition? And the thing that we've noticed is that we all remember when the Turing test was the big test of whether or not something was going to be sentient, right? And then we got closer to it and we have systems that can answer questions. We have systems that can mimic human behavior, but that's not the same. And you could very easily a free version ChatGPT, even a model I could load on your computer now could have probably blown away every Turing test there would have been 10 years ago, and we realized it's not an effective measure. So when we talk about AGI, is we say, hey, is a system that I can email it and it can do just about any human level task. Is it here right now? I would say for many cases, if you really want long, complex stuff, more challenging. But I would say that I think there's a lot of pieces to create something that we would feel was AGI like. That's
great. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to chat, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Tom.
If people want to get the attention mechanism or anything else you're doing, where should they go?
AndrewMayne.com, easiest place to find what I'm up to. And also I'm on X at Andrew Mayne.
Big thanks to Andrew for doing that. Nica, I think one of the things I took away from that conversation was we often talk about AI as of course it's trained on the bulk of the internet and it needs more data. But what Andrew was indicating is that a lot of these models have gotten to the point where they need quality. It's the quality of the data, not just the amount.
Absolutely. And I agreed with a lot of what he said. One of the last roles I had was leading a team. That was the whole point of the team, was validating the data quality and determining whether it should be passed downstream for our other team members in the pipeline to use it. And I have to say, it was a brand new team, a brand new group, something that I basically had to build from scratch. And that's one of the key things is, again, you can't out algorithm bad data. So you have to make sure you start with a solid base of data before you do anything. Otherwise, you're just, running bad data through these extremely complex algorithms. So I think he was spot on.
Yeah. It's like we were rolling downhill with the original ChatGPT 2 years ago, and now we're just kind of cruising, and there may be some cobblestones and stuff. So you gotta figure out how to keep it going. All right, before we get out of here, let's check out the mailbag. Got an email from Matt who says, "Hi folks, all-time listener, multi-year patroner, first-time commenter. I wanted to add to the discussion from yesterday around why OpenAI would want to create their own web browser. It was Friday's conversation. Beyond the obvious opportunities for data and new customers and paid features, I think it's an interesting idea for getting around the blocks that some sites and platforms have against OpenAI and other LLMs for indexing. Having their own browser, in theory, would mean that users could query the LLM based on content that is currently loaded in the browser. I love this idea because not only would they often want to summarize that content, but they may also want to ask deeper follow-up questions. They could also translate a page, modify the DOM to just show the relevant info for them, remove ads, and more. He wrote cough, cough. While I have the microphone, thank you so much for being such an amazing resource. Y'all are the best, and I hope you have a relaxing holiday weekend. Thank you, Matt. What do you think of that idea? I think that's intriguing of Matt saying it would allow them to answer questions about things that they're blocked from looking at otherwise.
Right. It's a very interesting concept. The only thing that I may worry about a little bit is how siloed that could potentially be. But outside of that, I think it's a good concept. It's a good thought process behind why they would want their browser. So great food for thought, Matt.
Yeah. No, we were looking for good ideas about why else they might want to do this. Thank you, Matt, for stepping up and giving us one. And thank you, Nica, for being here today. If folks want to find you more often than this, where do they go?
You can find me pretty much at Tech Savvy Diva, wherever there is a social media platform. You can also find me co-hosting my podcast Snobble West with Brother Tech, who's also been a contributor to DTNS over at snobblewestcast.com.
Fantastic. We have a new member of the DTNS family of podcasts as well. Data scientist Andrea Jones-Roy has a series called Behind the Data. If you would listen to our experiment week back in August, she launched the pilot back then. This week's episode, she talks with Seth Maskett about how to make thoughtful analysis from all the recent presidential election data. Again, Andrea Jones-Roy is super smart. They're one of my favorites and a favorite of a lot of you all by the emails as well. So if you want to find their new show, go to behindthedatashow.com. The importance, just like in the last episode, of being thoughtful about whether our narratives are based on real data. Go check it out. That's Behind the Data. Patrons, stick around.
I'm a data girly, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. Patrons, stick around for the extended show, Good Day Internet. A Chinese company tested whether a robot could talk other robots into defecting, and it did. So we're going to talk about what was really going on there. You can also catch the show live Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC. Find out more about that, dailytechnewsshow.com/live. We will be back tomorrow. Talk to you then.
The DTNS family of podcasts, helping each other understand.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.